I should introduce myself. I'm Mark Holmes. I was with the U staff that was the United States Strategic and Technical Air Forces in Europe, and head of all the air forces in Europe, the 8th, the 9th, and the 15th. And I was a very small unit, and I got in A2 division, the intelligence division. And I will state one thing I learned in the Army was never to volunteer. But I told Al and Dick if we were desperate sometime, I might appear. Please forgive my copious notes, but I find that when I'm within a handful of weeks of becoming an octogenarian, I needed some support. However, there is one good thing about getting older, as you probably know, is when you find the outdoor temperature approaching your age, you know it's going to be a nice day. I believe the last time I was before you, I told you about the fun and funny things I had happened to me in my 3.5 years of service, and I think Max said I must have had nothing but a good time. Well, I was lucky. And as some of you attended the World War II roundtable on the Project Manhattan, I spoke about my 5 hours with Enrico Fermi when he was sent to France, so I won't reiterate that. So today I tell you about 3 things, if I may. How I got into intelligence work. 2, I'd like to tell you about Lil. She was great. And 3rd, I'd like to cite a mission that stands out for me. I can't match your day-to-day exploits. I was just a courier at times, and I guess they call the missions for lack of any other name for them. How did I get into A2 intelligence branch? Well, honestly, I don't know. I can guess. We didn't have computers in those days, as you know, but it seems as if the Foreign 20 followed us all around. I had been to various schools, ordnance, administration, even learned to type. And I guess I had some language skills. I could speak Swedish, had 2 years of Latin, had a year of German in college. Anyway, the late summer of '44, I was sent from Greenock, Scotland, or that's where we landed. And I recall an interview with Major Roger H. Anderson. Now we're overseas. I'm a PFC and here's a major who wants to interview me. Obviously my knees are shaking. And he says, Private Holmes, you're from Minneapolis? I said, yes, sir. He says, so am I. Well, it says here the Form 20 states that you started college at 16. Explain that. Well, I said, I skipped 6th grade, sir. So I couldn't get a job, so I started Gustavus in 1939. Do you like languages? If so, why? Yes, sir. My dad was fluent in 7 different languages, encouraged us to learn. He was a Lutheran minister. States here that you're not married. Is that true? Yes, sir. Are you engaged? No, sir, and I do have a Dear John letter to prove it. He says, states here that you're from Minneapolis. What's the name of the bar and the Nickel Hotel? And I said, the Jolly Millers, sir. He was walking away at that time, and I remember him writing something down. His jaw dropped, and that's the last I saw him. Well, the rumor became prevalent that the last shipment out was going to be the best. At least the Army I was in, if you hadn't heard a rumor by 10 o'clock, you started one. There were 550 of us in that shipment, and one of my best friends, who was a lawyer from Milwaukee, he was 13 years my senior, so I'd been a best man at his wedding, and he was shipped out on the second one. The last shipment, there were 13 of us, and I happened to be on that. So we went from Greenock, Scotland to Bushy Park, which is just outside of London. And I remember walking in with our barracks bags and gear, and there was one light on in these bunk beds, but somebody had a radio on. And it was very eerie, because here was Axis Sally from Berlin welcoming us to Bushy Park with name, rank, serial number, hometowns. I tell you, the German intelligence was tremendous. We had no idea, couldn't believe it. Out of the 13 of us, 2 of us were sent to London. And that's when I want to talk to you about Lil. Because she was great. That's what we call living in London. And we always figured we'd like to get back to Lil, living in London again. We often saw your formations heading east. You could see the big contrails and so forth. But with Lil, we had fireworks almost every night. If there weren't air raids, or we had the B-1s, we were based at, billeted at number 3 Cardugan Square, which is down by Nitre Bridge, right by the river, or close to it, not too far from Harrods. And the B-1s would come over, as you know, and they'd go putt, putt, putt. And when the motor would stop, it either would go straight down or glide. And it seemed so many times the motor seemed to stop right above you and say, please, God, let it glide tonight. The B-2s, of course, were noiseless. During the 7 months I lived there, I gotten acquainted with a young lady from Orpington, which is in Kent between London and the Channel. And if I take her home to Orpington, we sometimes would see the V2 flash. That's all you knew at night, but you saw that flash, you'd automatically grab each other's hand and start counting. 1,001, 1,002. If you got up to 1,005, you knew you wouldn't be killed. If you got up to 1,010, you knew you wouldn't be injured. If you got up to 1,020, you say somebody else has had it, and then you went on talking about what you were talking about. And we were not officers, but we tried to be gentlemen. And the all clear was a very, very welcome sound. As many of you probably witnessed, the bomb shelters. I recall one story about the bomb shelter where of course, there's no lights on there, everything was dark, and this young English girl apparently said, "Get your hand off my knee." Not you, you. Well, those bomb shelters were all over, as you well know, and we saw many of you coming to London on leave. And sometimes it was quite fascinating and interesting to see the skill of the Piccadilly Commandos. But, and you may realize whom they were. I was assigned to youth staff, as it turned out. It turned out to be Major Anderson's office. And Reuben and I rounded out a complement of 5. He was a private, but could speak excellent German, could read it. He was a private, I was a PFC. And then we found out we were cleared for top secret work. So we could be a courier. Well, this meant that we could pick up documents that accumulated by agents behind the lines, mostly OSS agents, and they would specify designated places where they'd be. I'll admit I never saw an agent, I just saw documents. Later, when I got to know Major Anderson a little better, I went and stood by his desk. "Sir, may I ask you a question?" He said, "Go ahead, Holmes." I said, when you interviewed me in Greenock, Scotland, you said, asked the question was about the bar in the Lincoln Hotel. Was that important? He said, yes, it was. I said, may I ask why, sir? He says, according to your records, when you were in Minneapolis, you were too young to drink. And he said, anybody who could recall places, something you could not frequent, is important to it, could be important to us. So that's maybe one of the ways I got in there. Some incidents I recall from Lil. It was a very, very cold winter, and we were at number 3 Cadogan Square, and of course there was no coal in any of our billets. We would, excuse me, write letters home. We'd often go to the Parliament building because that was walking distance from Cadogan Square, and they had these great big logs in the fireplace. And they welcomed us. We could sit at tables, and you didn't talk to any of the people, but we could write letters, stuff like that. And I remember another time, well, we, as I say, had no heat, basically, but at the office, there was coal. You couldn't take any whole coal. That was at 43 Bryanston Square. It was 2 bus stops between our place and Bryanston Square. But they had sticks, which are about 6 to 8 inches long. And we explained to Major Anderson that it was cold, and we only had limited number of sticks in the fireplaces because basically the English at that time did not believe in central heating. And he said, well, once we get the coal started, we always have enough sticks left over. Why don't you guys take some sticks home at night? So we'd do it. We'd have to, of course, put it under our belts and under our overcoats, and so we could get by the guards. And then we'd get on the crowded 2-story buses, and then maybe at Hyde Park, there'd be a change, maybe some seats would open up, and they'd say, well, won't you sit down? And then more seats would open up. Well, we couldn't sit down, or we'd be sticking ourselves in the groin, you know. So we'd always stand up to get home. One time, I remember spending 5 days at the Marley House with OSS, and they taught us how to sleep. They figured rest was important, so that if anybody came within near proximity of you, you would obviously be on the alert. And to this day, I never used an alarm clock. But I remember shortly after Betty and I were married, and we had our first house, and she came in. I'd been on the road, I think, and she came in, and she said, I sat bolt upright in bed and said, what are you doing in my room? And she was so chagrined, she went out and slept on the couch. But that was something I remembered from OSS. There was a staff sergeant in our outfit who obviously outranked me, and he was in charge of the translators, and he found out that I'd sung in a choir. So he wondered if I'd like to go to some music festival or a music thing one night. So I said, well, okay, he outranked me. We went. It was at number 3 Buckingham Gate. And I remember all these people on the harpsichords and one thing and another, and, you know, and he said, well, how did you like it? I said, well, oh, very fine, very fine. Well, then he later invited me again. However, I'd been on a mission, I think it was 2 or 3 days, 2 days. And I remember getting off the lorry from Norwich, because we'd flown in there, about a 3.5 lorry ride, as I recall. I was dead tired, but he said, oh, fine, we just got time to go to this concert. Number 3 Buckingham Gate. I said, well, but he outranked me, so I went. I don't remember much about it, except it was so sonorous, and I think I slept through most of it, probably snoring, and I know that I was never invited back again. Doreen's mother, Mrs. Kibble, she owned a house and a tobacco shop, and they had a little farm, I think, in Orpington, Kent. But I think I was on a 5-day trek, and she came back. She had been looking at a house on the other side of town in Orpington, and she said, well, I want to see what you think of it. So she called the cab driver, who was a friend, and he took us over. And in that 1 week that I was gone, he pulled up in front of this house on the other side of Orpington, which she had made a bid on. And during that 1 week, it had a direct hit. And obviously many times sitting in their kitchen, cups would rattle in the cupboard. And then I said I'd tell you about one mission that seems to stand out for me. It was one of our last. And I'm sure a lot of you had things that you thought, well, this is going to be milk run, so no big deal. And the mission was to pick up documents in an abandoned hangar in an abandoned airstrip. And the location was northeast of Halle, which was northeast of Nuremberg. And Reuben and I got dropped in the night before, okay. We found the airstrip, we found the hangar, and we found the documents. I would say it was about almost from here to the post there, and about that high. Anyway, we debated about taking a load out under the cover of darkness. However, OSS had taught us that if there are no people around, and there didn't happen to be any people, they may have dogs. And you have dogs, that's worse than having people, because you're attacked by a dog, or you shoot the dog, and then you're really in trouble. So anyway, we decided to take our chance and get it out in the morning. So we slept on our parachutes and ate our K rations, smoked cigarettes, and so forth. At 0600, the aircraft came in, which is a C-47. And Rube and I each took a load, and I said, well, it was just too much to carry, so we got out to the airstrip and put them on the aircraft, and I said, I'll go back for the other load. So I ran back a couple of blocks and came back with the other load and got out to the airstrip, and the aircraft's the end of the runway, turned around, taken off. And, don't leave me, please. Well, the pilot saw me, and of course he stopped to pick me up. Now the pilot and the co-pilot was their second mission over Europe. They'd never been in combat. I think the flight engineer had been on 5 missions. I'm not sure what kind. Anyway, we stopped, and of course we had a taxi back to the end of the runway to take off into the wind. And I told Reuben, I said, I thought I'd told you to tell the pilot to wait. Well, he says, I couldn't make myself heard over the roar of the engines. I said, well, I sure as heck could hear the profanity when I got on board. Anyway, just as we're about to lift off, here come the German vehicles out to the airstrip. So the pilot changed the flight plan, which is smart because his prerogative, and it'd be so obvious and where we were located, going north over the North Sea and so forth. So he decided to go south. I don't know if he wanted to see the Alps or something, but we got down over Stuttgart, and of course that was one of the most heavily guarded cities because of Mercedes-Benz. And I remember sitting behind him, and he saw this stuff coming up. I think he thought it was flowers. And anyway, we got tagged, and I caught a little bouquet in my right knee, and we were told to bail out. So we cracked up in a little town called Esslingen. That's about 18 kilometers east of, a little north and east of Stuttgart. shoot him. We couldn't let him go, so we tied him up to the fence post with the parachute broken. And then we headed north and west. I kind of made a makeshift crutch for my knee. And after about 4.5 hours, I think it was, we hit a command post. Oh boy, we're home free. And, but we being Air Corps had no idea what the password was on the ground. And at that time, of course, there were a lot of the Germans trying to get to the west to avoid being captured by the Russians. And they were wearing American uniforms and dead GIs. A lot of them spoke very good English. And so the guys at the command post were just doing their job. And we tried things like, who won the World Series last year or something. Nothing worked. Finally got a hold of some captain who came by, and I said, well, Captain, if you got a radio, would you call my boss, General Banfield? I think he's in Saint-Germain, France today. He looked at me, I'm a sergeant, but he did. He came back and he said, General Banfield said you're ours, come on in. So, anyway, that's one mission I won't forget. A little postscript on it. In 1989, my two younger sons took me skiing at Berchtesgaden. And we'd landed in Frankfurt, and Todd had rented a van. We're driving south towards Munich. And I'm sitting in the passenger side, the front seat. I see this big sign, Esslingen. I said, slow down. I'd like to kind of look this over, see if I could find out where we cracked up. My younger son in the back seat had never heard about the experience. He said, what do you mean, you got shot down here? And I said, no, we were shot down in Stuttgart, but we cracked up here. Well, we looked around and we think we found the field where we cracked up in, but I think it's a shopping center now. Well, merci beaucoup. Taxamukit. Dankeschön, meine Freunde und Freunde. Thank you very much. You're a good audience.